Hey everyone, this is actual soil and my hands are in it. Boy, does it feel good to be doing a little bit of gardening instead of just talking about it or planning for it. And what I'm doing today is propagating a couple of things that I overwintered or am in the process of overwintering, but it's time to get these things started. And that's going to be Plectranthus Silver Shield and also some lavender. So we'll start with the Plectranthus. This is a plant that I used all over the place last year and had the hardest time finding, which is why I decided to try to overwinter it because I didn't want to have to go through that hassle of trying to find it again. Now you can grow this from seeds. I feel like it takes a really long time to grow from seeds. The one time I tried it, I didn't have a lot of luck with it. So I'm actually going to just grow this from cuttings because this is such an easy plant to grow from cuttings. Plectranthus is in the same family as coleus, and you guys know how easy it is to root coleus cuttings. So this is one of my very pathetic plants that I've been overwintering. You can tell it doesn't look great. We don't need it to look great. We just need it to have some material for cuttings on there. Now I have previously cut a few off of the second plant that I had, and I've had them rooting in water. It works really well to just stick this one in water, but also this one roots so easily. I find in summer when I prune on this, I just stick the cuttings straight into the soil and walk away and they take root with no problem. So I think this is a really good one for trying to propagate by cuttings. So I'm going to propagate some of these that I've already rooted a little bit in water, and then I'll just show you the process of taking cutting off of here. I just have regular potting mix in here. This is not seed starting mix, this is regular potting mix, but I'm going to add some perlite to this just to lighten it up just a touch, because the one thing, since cuttings don't have a lot of roots, they really can't tolerate being overwatered at all. So I always feel like it's a good idea to add a little something. Now, a little bit of like chicken grit would work fine for this too. Perlite is lighter and a little bit easier to handle, and also easier for me to get. This soil is really quite damp already, so I don't think I need to moisten it anymore. So this is the tray that I'm going to use for these. This is just a tray I got some plants in last year. You can see these holes are really quite big. They're probably, maybe they're even 3 inches, but they're certainly 2.5 and quite deep. And I'm sort of hoping that I don't have to transplant these on at all. I'm hoping they can live out their life until I get them planted wherever they're going to go in here, which saves me a step, and I'm all about that. Okay, so like I said, these are the cuttings that have been rooting for, this is probably only 3 weeks or so, and some of these have some really nice roots on them. They all have, most of them have a little bit of something started on them. So like I said, these root so easily. The only thing you want to make sure you do when you do these is pinch out the tops of these. You don't want them growing straight up. You want them working on roots. I find that my finger works as a great thing to make a hole. So this one is actually like a little tall, and there are roots at the bottom, but I'm going to nip off this top out of this because we don't need that. So this is exactly how you could do coleus cuttings if you had saved coleus. Sometimes I take off these bottom leaves here so that you don't want any of those leaves under there. And I'm actually going to, same thing on this one. I'm just going to nip out the top on that one again. If you were to be cutting these and you just wanted to root these directly, I don't actually think that the water step is necessary for this, but it is easy. So what I do is you could actually get a couple, you can do this in 2 ways. You can get a couple cuttings out of one stem, or I'm just going to take one here. That will sprout again there, just as when you trim anything else. And then you just want to make sure to nip out this centerpiece right here. You can do something like a rooting hormone powder. Again, a lot of cuttings this helps with. I don't feel that it's actually necessary to do this on these, but I will show you anyway. So this is just a rooting hormone powder. You can get this at probably any hardware store, certainly any garden center. You just want to dab a little bit right there on the end. I usually put it in the cap and then tap it off. You don't need extras in there. And then same deal. Create a hole in some way so that you're not damaging the bottom of your stem when it goes in there. If you're taking cuttings, another thing you can do, because keep in mind, you're trying to get roots, you're not trying to grow leaves. You can also just cut the leaves in half if they seem big, or because that way it will have less leaf to support. And then the other thing to look for is, so do you see how, can you see how this one right here is flowering? You try not to take cuttings from a flowering stem. And actually what I'm going to do is I'm not going to take a cutting there, but I am going to cut those flowers off. Okay, that's the Plectranthus. So like I said, don't worry about the fact that this looks like garbage, because we're not going to use this year probably. I mean, theoretically we might be able to, but more than likely the plants that we grow from cuttings will be much nicer and more vigorous than this one will be. So next up is a Spanish lavender. This is something that I took cuttings from at the end of summer to try to root, because it can be a little hard to find, a little expensive, and I really like having it. This is not a lavender that's hardy in my area, although you could certainly do the same process for hardy lavender. This is a lavender, though, that I believe is only hardy down to 7B maybe, so I'm 5B or so. So certainly this would not overwinter for me. I didn't want to bring the whole plant in. I figured that would be, I just kind of thought that bringing the whole plant in would be take up a lot of room, and I don't think the plant, they really start to decline when you bring them in. So I rooted cuttings instead. And I use the exact same process to take these cuttings back in fall that I did to just make this Plectranthus to do this Plectranthus right now. I just cut some stems, non-flowering ones, and then I stripped off the bottom leaves, dipped them in a little bit of that hormone rooting powder, and just made with my finger or a pencil a little, hole right along the edge of this pot, and tuck it in there fairly far. And then what I do is, and tucking it in on the side is helpful because it gives it a nice easy root run on the edge of the pot here, but it also makes sure that it doesn't get too moist. And that's particularly important with something like lavender that really appreciates that good drainage. And then I nip off the top so that we don't have top growth, we want root growth. And then I just stick a plastic Ziploc bag over the pot to keep it nice and humid for the first probably 3 weeks or so. And that's it. And then I just kept these under lights, but not super bright lights, all winter right up until this point. And you can see that we've got nice new growth here. So we know, and there's resistance when we pull on it. So we know that this is rooted and ready to be moved on. Lavender, of course, wants absolutely excellent drainage. So I'm going to add even more perlite to the mix. Okay, so I'm just going to use the same pot or the same tray that I used for the Plectranthus, strictly to save space. Now, if for some reason we would get to a situation where these plants start needing like different conditions, something needs less sun or more sun, or something's growing faster or whatever, I can always cut this tray apart and it won't be any big deal. Now that we've done all this work to create these roots, we don't want to screw anything up by trying to dig around in there. So I'm actually going to dump this whole thing out and see what happens. Here we go. Oh, wow. Okay. This is great. Look at all the roots we have in there. Can you see all those roots? Oh my gosh, they look absolutely fabulous. So we're just going to gently tease out these little plants. So you can see on this one, you can see how much of it I buried. This is the whole stem that I buried, and there's roots all along that stem there. Same process, although with these, I probably shouldn't have filled the whole thing up because I think we're going to need a little bit more room for the roots. I'm going to actually cut some of these just because I think it's better to have a straight root run than have them all jammed up in a ball in there. Okay, so once again, we're just going to gently work these apart. So we don't have the giant like root balls that we had in that first one, probably because there were fewer plants in that first one. So I have to say, these lavender cuttings went so much better than I anticipated they would. Okay, well there is my future lavender, my future Plectranthus, and that was overall pretty painless. So these will go down to the basement, which is where I have my grow lights set up. I'll put them under grow lights. I will put them in a tray, and I will probably bottom water these. And that's how I prefer to water anything that I can do that way. And we'll just keep them growing, and hopefully I'll be able to give you an update of some beautiful plants for this summer. If you found this helpful, do me a favor, give it a like. Maybe think about subscribing if you haven't already. It really helps, and I certainly appreciate it. And of course, you're not going to want to miss the update on what happens with these. All right, you have a great day in your garden, planning for your garden, or doing something for your garden, and we'll see you soon.